What's shaking, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Chameleons and their 1983 album, The Script of the Bridge. Thank you again to Stuart. And the next track is Second Skin. It makes me think of shedding one's skin, of some form of metamorphosis, maybe a secondary layer under your surface skin, which, could be about putting up an exterior, but what you're really feeling, or the real sensitivity being at your second skin. Maybe it's a visual reference, maybe it is metaphorical or figurative, but it sort of functions on a level where the visual setting or depiction is serving as the figurative vehicle. In any case, it is short and cryptic, so it's hard to get a sense of what it might be like if it isn't any of the things I just mentioned. I'll try to pick up what I can on a first listen. This is the Chameleons. The track is Second Skin, and it's from their 1983 album, The Script of the Bridge. Or is it just Script of the Bridge? I think it's just Script of the Bridge. Apologies. These guys are stupidly good. I've only heard like, what, 4 songs, 3 songs? I'm all in on these guys. The atmosphere of their tunes is incredible. The philosophical reflection and... what's the right word? Semantic wisdom conveyed by some of their lines is incredible. The vocal delivery, atmospheric, a bit artistic, also like evocative or, a bit mysterious. I was thinking while I was listening, and again, I do this early in deep dives. My brain is keen to like, oh, it's kind of like these guys, or kind of like these guys, or a little bit like this phase of this group, and so on. I was thinking it was somewhere between the darker, more moody Cure stuff I've heard, a touch, just a tiny bit of like the Smiths at their most artistic and like least, sarcastic and whatever, and maybe even a bit like early U2. Like it was somewhere in that Venn diagram, maybe most like darker Cure, but I definitely heard like elements that made me think of all those 3 different associations, and yet at the same time, not any one of them completely. So yeah, I really love the atmosphere of their tunes, and I believe Stuart was saying like, that's kind of one of the things they're known for, is like having these really compelling soundscapes, and like the feeling or atmosphere of their tunes stands out, and that's definitely the case here. Again, I love his vocals. They're like reflective, a bit spaced out, but also like speaking truths. I enjoy what I caught from the lyrics, which more on that in a moment, but yeah, it was kind of like moody post-punk meets new wave, like synth rock a little bit. In any case, I feel like the essence of the, and in fact, how long was that? That was 7 minutes or something like that. Yeah, not quite, but close. So okay, like we definitely had an indication that there was something to what I was thinking about him, emerging from his first skin, like, literally he says like he shed his skin, came out of his cocoon, and the skin he had under that was more sensitive, I believe. So yeah, like what he's really feeling was beneath the like rougher initial exterior. But it sounds like he's also saying to those listening, or to the people being addressed, or the person being addressed, that like, at some point you have to realize like it's only your second skin, so that like, this is a process, this is an experience that others will go through, and it's, part of dealing with things or getting in touch with your actual self. So I don't know the full story here. There's some lines I didn't get, in part because the lines were a bit, echoed and spacey. But yeah, it does feel like there is something to going through a metamorphosis, and by extension, shedding a rougher, less feeling exterior, and, through that chrysalis, getting in touch with something that is more sensitive. Whether that means you're more vulnerable, or at the very least, or maybe at the same time, more capable of understanding what you're feeling. But yeah, a really atmospheric tune, fantastic track. Thank you again to Stuart. Let me know what you think of this one, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.